Good morning and welcome. Glad to be with you again. Just really appreciate the fact that you guys take the time to listen to these devotionals, and my prayer is constantly that they would be of benefit and help to you and encourage you in your daily journey. Today is referred to by many people as being Hump Day. That means that it's in the middle of the week. You know that Wednesday you've just got over the hump and you're heading down into the weekend. Or at least that's the way it used to be. Now my week is so cattywampus that I have to wake up each morning and not just simply ask what day it is, but what are my responsibilities and things I need to take care of today? Because I easily lose track and I can fall behind really, really quickly, and that's not pretty. But we've been talking this last week, the last few days, about foundations and asking the question, what is the foundation that your life is built upon? How deep is that foundation? And more particularly, how easily is that foundation fractured or shattered or just shaken up real good? A building that's built properly can survive an earthquake. One that is not will collapse no matter how strong it appears to be. And I've been in countries in the third world where a mild earthquake would take place and the entire, many times several story building would just simply crumble and fall down. And having watched some of those buildings being built in those countries, I wasn't real surprised because whoever was building it was not planning ahead for the day when that would be shaken. And I think that happens to us as Christians. We don't really foresee difficulties many times. We feel like we're pretty secure in our situation. And then when something like the Great Disruption happens, we're pretty shaken, especially when it doesn't pass quickly. I know 9/11 was a real shaking, disrupting experience, but the problem was that after a couple of weeks, we seemed to get back to normalcy, and very quickly life went on as it was, and people didn't pay a lot of attention to it. So this has been different because not only did it disrupt our life, and not only was it a man-made disruption, it's extended out so much longer than any of us had imagined it would. Remember, they promised we'll take a couple of weeks shut down and then we'll start back up. Well, that didn't happen, and they find new reasons why to extend it out further and further on. But one of the things that we do discover is there's only one foundation that our life can be built on that can't be shaken. And so that presents us with two simple questions. What is your foundation and how deep is your foundation? And for scripture, I want to look at 1 Corinthians 3:10, a passage I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but he addresses both these questions, at least at how we should be responding. He says, according to the grace of God which was given to me, like a wise master builder, I laid a foundation. So Paul says, I laid a foundation. What is that foundation? Well, he goes on to say it's Jesus Christ. He says, but each man must be careful how he builds on it, for no one can lay a foundation other than the one which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. But then he adds, if any man builds on the foundation with gold or silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each man's work will become evident, for the day will show it, because it is to be revealed with fire, and the fire itself will test the quality of each man's work. If any man's work which he has built on remains, he will receive a reward. If any man's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. And then he adds, do you not know that you are a temple of God? So the important thing to realize is that God is trying to build my life into a temple, but he can't build it into a temple that's really worthy of his worship unless I have the proper foundation underneath it. In the ancient world, when they would build temples, that was the most extravagant and expensive building, and they built them to last millennia. I mean, even if you look at the great cathedrals of Europe, even though many of them are for the most part empty, they're massively well-built buildings that were designed purposely to stand the test of time. And time does test us. It's called the decay process, the gravitational effect of decay. And so every one of our lives is being tested by time, and it will reveal what kind of a foundation we have. And as we pass through time, we have experiences that are tremendously shaking and disruptive to our day-to-day existence. And so the question that we find is, first of all, how do we build a deep foundation that can withstand that kind of testing? And the first answer is given by Jesus in Matthew 6:33. We said, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you. So the first thing we knew is we seek his kingdom and his righteousness. In other words, it means that you have to begin really doing some internal digging in your life, that what is going to be the central focus of my life? What is going to be the most important thing? What is the thing that is most non-negotiable? The things that I will not compromise on. And that's why Paul said that foundation, the only one that we can lay that meets those requirements, is Jesus Christ. We commit ourselves to being the servants of Jesus Christ. And that word servant is in Greek, it's the word doulos, which means a bond slave, somebody who is enslaved to somebody, who has sold themselves to be the servant or the slave of another. And so that's where we begin. We say, Lord, here's my life. Take it and use it for your glory and your honor. You do with it as you please. That's where the life of faith begins, not in being able to control the forces and get whatever I want, but rather to bring myself into a place of absolute surrender where I'm saying, God, here's my life. I surrender it to you. Let me say this, friends, that if you haven't done that, and even though you may be professing to be a Christian, or you ask Christ into your heart and you may be born again, but have you ever really submitted to his lordship and submitted your life to becoming his bondslave? To say, Lord, your will be done in my life. Someone once said, it's like instead of writing out a contract saying this is what I want from God, that you simply just sign the bottom and hand God the blank page and let him fill in the details that is going to be your life from that point forward. That's where we need to begin. And I would say this to many of you who may have been Christian for 20, 30 years. Maybe you have to go back and relook at what's taken place. Have you, over the years, started adding in your own minimum requirements? Something I used to always say that God convicted me of years ago is that slaves can't quit. That basically a slave can't set his terms of service. He can't set his wages. He can't set his hours. He can't decide when he starts and when he ends. A slave is someone who is totally owned for the rest of their life by their master. And he sets all those parameters. And if he's a good master, like our master is, his generosity exceeds anything he ever requires of us. But nonetheless, he is the master, and we need to begin by giving him that kind of blank check to our life and saying, Lord, you fill in the amount that you want from me, and I will provide. I will meet that requirement by the grace of God. We'll continue this conversation because I have a few more things I want to tie in today to our message. So God bless you and take care.